will lose his tax ID number, and we will just become a byproduct of Epic Masjid and take their funds, if they have any. And I will join your YouTube channel, you give me all your followers. But inshallah, Allah protect all the institutions. Say Ameen. So I'm going to sit down, and I think it'll be better if you sit here so I can ask all three of you questions. Please, Sheikh. I love every person on the stage so much. And Sheikh Yasir, I want to thank you for this beautiful reminder. What you brought so much knowledge, so much energy. And this is why we all love Sheikh Yasir Qadhi. Correct, guys? Give him one more round of applause, guys. And
Before we begin, I got to say one thing. I know you joked about being canceled. We will be canceled by the Muslim fanatics, that's fine.
I'm okay.
But to be careful, to be precise, sisters and brothers, understand one thing. When you're a non-profit, you are allowed to make political statements. You cannot campaign for politicians. Understand this, right? Everything I said here, it is legit, don't worry. You're not going to get canceled.
I'm not worried. I've been canceled a few times.
No, I say this because a lot of imams and shuyukhs think that because they're an imam, because they're a sheikh, they cannot become political. No. Your tax ID allows you to make political statements. You cannot endorse a candidate by name. You can talk as much policy, you can badmouth as much policy. You can even discuss people, but you cannot, on the mimbar, using your tax-free status, tell your congregation, vote for this candidate instead of that candidate. You have to be clear about this, right? A lot of shuyukh are way too apolitical. And when you talk to them, say, oh, we're a non-profit, we're not allowed to talk politics. Ya akhi, bringing awareness to Gaza is not becoming political, it's being human.
Yep. Round of applause, guys. I'm going to ask, inshallah, all of them questions, all the mashayikh here questions, but even the mashayikh here are here to listen to Sheikh Yasir Qadhi. You came all the way from Dallas, and we got to make sure your time is worth it. The flight was worth it. We paid that much money for you to come here. We're going to do all this for free. You know, we're gonna drain you tonight. Like all the time he has, even after this, he has to do a podcast, and then after that, he has a private dinner with the mashayikh. So Sheikh Yasir Qadhi, don't think about sleeping tonight. And then tomorrow, 8 o'clock in the morning, he's so fortunate to be on the same flight with me to Orlando, where Mickey will greet us. You know, and may Allah guide him too. Say, Ameen, Yasir Qadhi. Say, you Zionist. He's gonna say that to him when he arrives. Sheikh Yasir Qadhi, you know, because you're on the stage with me, I feel sorry for you. Because there are multiple times you attacked me when I was sitting there. And I don't have a personality to forgive you. So we're going to get you back.
I pointed Maulana's muftis. I'm always pointing.
Like he pointed at me like 5 times. Who's going to vote for him? Come on, ladies. Would you guys vote for me? Yeah. If you got the women's vote, you got the husband's vote, the children's vote, everybody's going to vote. Okay. Sheikh Yasir Qadhi, on a serious note, Jazakallah khair. As you talked about Palestine, you talked about Andalus, we talked about Sheikh Mufti Asim was here earlier, you talked about the conquest of Sham, and Sheikh Masmani spoke earlier. What should we do with our younger generation that's for the first time seeing this much discussion? This is next generation. Like, you know, there was the millennial generation had some form of awareness, generations, but there are people in middle school, high school, college, for the first time they're seeing this much engagement, this type of genocide that, you know, that's happening in Gaza and across the world. Sometimes these guys have way too much exposure to social media, but still very little, you know, there is an engagement. MashaAllah, if you look at the protests in Washington, D.C., you were there, I heard your very fiery speech there. You know, there was 500,000 people there, all of them were youth. But what message are we going to share with our youth? Should they keep that effort going? They're afraid they might not get accepted in universities. They're afraid they might get fired. They're afraid of what people are saying on college campuses. We see what happened in Harvard and other universities. So Sheikh Yasir, some words of advice for our youth who are sitting in this hall.
So I can't speak to every single person's bravery and level of sacrifice. You have to decide that fine line. Without a doubt, nobody's encouraging acts that are going to get you into jail or acts of violence. Nobody's encouraging that, right? At the same time, certain people need to push back at the narrative and be brave. Now, who those people are, that is very personal, very subjective. It depends on, firstly, your own personality. Not everybody is the same. And even amongst the Sahaba, and this is again that awkward topic that we need to mention, that Allah created people differently. Not everybody is a Khalid ibn Walid. And again, I have a whole lecture about Hassan ibn Thabit. Go listen to him. His contribution was totally different than the contributions of others, right? So we have different roles to play. And I'm not saying every single person needs to push back at every single level, but collectively, we do need to push back. Today, it went viral where a hijabi sister in New York going in the cafe, and she has the Free Gaza, sticker, right? And I'm sorry to be blunt, some jerk, literally, just comes and harasses her. You guys saw the video, right? MashaAllah, she stood her ground. Don't we need strong sisters like that? She videotaped what she's supposed to do. Make sure you're videotaping, right? And she kept on pushing back politely, but firmly. You could tell from her voice, she was a bit nervous, but you know what? That's exactly what needs to do. Now, perhaps some would have been even more blunt, and perhaps some would have been intimidated. Is that not the case? Each person needs to decide, but you need to push back. I know for a fact that the MSAs of Columbia and Harvard and others, they are doing their best to push back. They're already students. They're doing their best to push back despite the backlash, right? It is so sad that the law students in Stanford and other places, the Muslim, Palestinian and Muslim law students were literally, what is it called? When you expose their names and identities, what is it called? Doxed. They were doxed. They were literally doxed in public that, oh, these are the people, and an appeal went out anonymously by some of these rich donors. Do not hire these graduates from law school. None of the firms should hire them. It is what it is. I can't tell you whether you should be in that camp or not. But I will tell you, those that are, they've won the admiration and bravery of millions of people, correct? And without a doubt, whoever puts their trust in Allah, somebody is going to take that and say, you know what, I want that person. And Allah will find a way out for them. So generically, fard kifaya, every one of you, I encourage you to do whatever is in your qudrah, your capabilities, your courage, and your comfort zone, to persuade, to push back, whether you're in your middle school and all you can do is just say, well, there are two sides of it, and try listening to the other side. That's not really going to get you into trouble per se, really. If that's all you can say, at least it's better than nothing, right? And if you can do more than this, if you can bring a speaker, if you can... Now, not everybody needs to do everything. So somebody asked me that, should I resign from my company because it has a contract with Israel? This is in Dallas. I said, if we were to be consistent, then we would, all of us, be guilty because our tax dollars are going to Israel. We have to be judicious and wise. Just because your company has a contract out of hundreds of contracts doesn't make your company pro-Zionist, right? Be wise. Is it now, that's not the same as a company that is based in occupied Palestinian land, right? You can't equate a company based in Dallas that has 100 contracts, one of them is with an Israeli company, versus a company like, let's say, Sabra, hummus, right? Sabra hummus, it should be haram for any of you to buy it, okay? It should not ever, because it is coming from land that has been illegally occupied. We cannot be purchasing any Sabra products. You get my point here, right? You can't equate the two, that, oh, there's a company that has one contract of 100. I told the brother, if you wanted to be consistent, me and you, all of us, we cancel ourselves for living in America. No, you can't. You have to be effective. Also, who are you? Are you a big shot, vice president or something, such that your resignation is going to send shockwaves? Or are you nobody, such that it's not going to impact and they're going to get somebody else? So there's a whole bunch of factors to discuss. There's not an equation I can give you, but all I'm saying, every one of us has a role to play and a function to do. Every one of us has to push back, raise awareness, and the battle here is long-term. We might not see the results in our lifetime, so be it. That's the sad reality. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. The last time we didn't have Palestine, the last time Aqsa was conquered, 92 years went by. That's 3-4 generations. That's why I gave a khatara 2 months ago, about the interim and what the ulama did in the interim, that they didn't just give up. They realized they have a long-term goal ahead, right? So we don't know, is it gonna come in our lifetime or not? This might be a generational battle. It might be. But the good news is that the tide is shifting. The good news is that those under the age of 35, a majority of them are pro-Palestinian, and those above the age of 35 are majority pro-Israeli. This is in our country. Do you want to know why? One simple reason. Those under the age of 35, they don't get their news from New York Times and BBC and whatnot. They get their news from TikTok, from Twitter, from Facebook. They get their news from Instagram. And every single young man or woman is able to visually see what the brothers and sisters in Gaza are going through. This is of the benefits and perks of being in modern times. Social media has flattened the curve. You don't need to go to BBC. You don't need to get it filtered through the New York Times. The New York Times publicly praised IDF 2 days ago. Wallahi, disgusting. Publicly talked about the women of IDF for role model feminists. A'udhu billah, as you kill women, you're a role model feminist? New York Times did this. They're one of the most reputable organized media in this country. As you know, they have their interests, but the next generation doesn't even read the New York Times. They're watching news on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and so they're seeing what's happening live. Therefore, we're in this for the long run. Victory is guaranteed, but it is not guaranteed tomorrow. So be on this correct side of history, push back what you can, retweet, spread information, and collectively we are doing what we can, inshallah ta'ala.
Jazakallah khair. Can we get a round of applause for Sheikh? I want to ask Mufti Abdul Rahman and Sheikh Masmani, both of them, I forced them to join me on the stage. I didn't want me and Sheikh Yasir to be on the stage alone. Too much ayn. Too much evil eye. I don't want to get all the, between you and me, So kind of spread that khair. So I want to ask Sheikh Abdul Rahman, from a spiritual lens, from a political engagement, Sheikh Yasir has spoken very eloquently about, from an individual spiritual lens, what can we do and what more should we do for our families? Because it's draining. Like you're going out to protests, you're watching what's happening on social media, even hearing these speeches, it could be draining. Like you're leaving like, man, I know the tide's moving, we've moved yard by yard, next generation, but it could be draining. Even the Prophet ﷺ, فَإِذَا فَرَغْتَ فَانْصَبْ. Da'wah was draining, political engagement was draining, meeting people, talking to people, you get burnt out. So Mufti Abdul Rahman, I want to ask you and Sheikh Masmari, I'm going to beg Sheikh Masmari to speak after you, But if you can kindly say some words and shed some light on this.
Jazakallah khair. Why are you making me say the spiritual stuff? I can't talk about political stuff.
I want to protect you.
What comes to my mind is that, again, we had a whole discussion about history, and we take lessons from history, right? And who is better to take lesson from than the Prophet ﷺ himself? Wahi comes to him in the time when he was 40 years old in Mecca, which was a really horrible climate. There were horrible things happening over there. What did he do to combat that? Look in the Quran. Let's start with those steps. Everything you heard today, coupled with this, because they go hand in hand. So Sheikh, you can correct me. First of all, it starts with Ya ayyuhal muzammil qum al-layla illa qalila nisfahu aw inqus minhu qalila. Just summarizing the whole thing. It always starts with tahajjud. It always starts with there. Like you can't have a group of Muslims or sitting in this hall thinking that we're going to get a lot done just because of our voices. Yes, we can, that's not how Muslims in the past got things done. Allah takes care of our affairs. Allah is with us, Allah is not with them. That's the biggest factor. That's the biggest deciding factor. So you have that. And then Allah in Surah Muzammil says about reading Quran, because Quran gives you guidance, Quran gives you hope. So ever since this took place, this should be a lesson for us that our tahajjud should have increased, our tilawah should have increased. Then in Surah Mudaththir, you have qum fa'andir. You have this idea of being active in the community. Get up, do something. Don't be afraid. Then you have Ya ayyuhal mudaththir qum fa'andir wa rabbaka fakabbir. Glorify your Lord. Of talking about all these different strategies, how much of my time do I spend Not just thinking, but speaking, using my tongue to glorify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the strategy given to the Prophet ﷺ. Don't speak about anything else. وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. Speak about Allah. While they're like this and they have that and they have this much money, Allah has much more than that. Allah controls everything. Hearts are in the hands of Allah. It changes everything the moment you start talking like that. وَرَبَّكَ فَكَبِّرْ. Fifth, وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ. All right. And there's many tafseers of وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ. One of them is purify your internal self. One of them of Hassan al-Basri is when the climate is so bad, at any time there is no compromise for having hatred for Muslims, for each other. But definitely at a time where non-Muslims are attacking us the way they are, at this point you put all your grudges away. ثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِرْ. This is not a time where we have grudges in our communities. We have difference of opinions in our communities and we can't get over it. This is not the time for it. We don't have time for that. At this point, clear all that up. Because, you know, what's happening in Gaza right now, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them victory. Say Ameen. Look, for us living in America right now, within our own community, this is what the Prophet is being told. وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِرْ. Purify yourself. One of the tafseers of this, of course, is ma'asiyah, but the next one talks about it as well, is purify your internal self. Love each other right now. We need that love for each other. We desperately need to love each other because that's not what sisters are feeling when they're walking around with free Palestine flags. That's not what brothers are feeling when they're walking around. That's not what they're feeling. You know what's interesting in Surah Isra? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, one whole passage, He speaks about the criticism and remarks the kuffar of Makkah are throwing at the Prophet's way. After that entire passage, Allah starts the next passage by saying, وَقُلْ لِعِبَادِي يَقُولُ الَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. And say, O Prophet of Allah, to my servants, now the passage goes towards the Muslims, say to my servants, there are three ways to speak: a bad way, a good way, and the best way. In these times, only speak in the best manner. People are already hearing all these negative things. Speak in the best manner to each other. Be polite to each other. So this is the next strategy with ثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِرْ. وَالرُّجْزَ فَهْجُرْ. If there was ever a time to leave sinning, this is the time. All those years, all those months, we had a problem leaving a sin. The Prophet is saying, if you're going to get up and call towards Allah, and call towards justice, and call towards a change, then you have to change yourself. This is not something I'm saying. This is in the Quran. وَالرُّجْزَ فَهْجُرْ. Leave the sins now. Your leaving a sin could help a life in Gaza. Wallahi, it could. Because Allah is listening to our du'as. Sheikh Tariq Jamil was just asked in front of me by one person who was sitting in front of him for like 5 minutes. He went on and on and on about, you know, how should we make dua? What are the etiquettes of dua? How should I do this? How should I do this? And at the end of the whole question, Sheikh just says, Allah khoob achhe sunne wale hain. Allah is a good listener. Don't worry how you speak to Him. He's Samia. He can hear you. But these are some prerequisites. وَلَا تَمْنُن تَسْتَكْثِرْ. And then don't start saying, look what I'm doing, oh Allah, so where's the help? When is it going to increase? Don't present your efforts to Allah. وَلِرَبِّكَ فَاصْبِرْ. And for the sake of Allah, have patience. Stay determined. Until when do we stay determined? فَإِذَا نُقِرَ فِي النَّاقُرِ فَذَلِكَ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَوْمٌ عَسِيرٌ. Until the trumpet blows. Brothers and sisters, that's when we stay patient, and we're staying patient for the sake of Allah. This is the criteria, this is the way, and inshallah, the moment we see the Prophet ﷺ, all the pain was worth it. The job that we lost, the opportunities that we lost, all that will be worth it. Sahaba did much more, we'll do some, but if we don't have this coupled with all the activism and protests, we don't have this down. So I encourage all of us, think about it. Alhamdulillah, we've done so much and there's so much good that has happened, but there's so much potential for more good. And we should see that good. Allah says about the people, the prophets, after mentioning 12 prophets in Surah Maryam, He says, فَخَلَفَ مِن بَعْدِهِمْ خَلْفٌ. These prophets, children came after them, and so those people in Israel, factually, some of them are children of prophets. How did they screw it up? What caused their decline? Ada'u salah. They wasted their prayer. They wasted the relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we go down the same route, then Allah won't help us. This is the template that I feel that when you ask me this question, that I feel if we follow this template, coupled with what Sheikh Yasir is saying, we have so much potential, we put it together, I think inshallah we will see a difference in our lifetime.
Takbir. Guys, Sheikh Masmari is whispering to me, he said, please, I'm exhausted. There's Sheikh Yasir Qadhi here. I have him ask all the, I'm exposing him. And I want to hear Sheikh Masmari. I don't care if you guys want to hear Sheikh Masmari. I want to hear Sheikh Masmari. Can we get that mic? I'll give it to him. Sheikh, as the leader of the Ummah and the Ummah in Michigan, mashallah, you deal with so many people, members of the community, the youth. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward you. Say Ameen. What is your advice to families? Families, families are watching all of this, children, adults, at home. What should be the mannerism and character that parents deal with each other, like husband and wife, and these difficult times comes? It's stressful. Sometimes, you get frustrated from watching something and you take it out on someone at home. Because it's frustrating, it's so draining. Like, there are times where the husband and wife, I know some people are like, I don't know what you're talking about, I don't feel like that. But there's some people who have been watching this for 70 years, 60 years, and they're watching this again and again and again and again, and they're like, literally, they go to weddings depressed. They go to public events depressed. They come home depressed. What can help these people's thought process at home in public engagement? I know it's painful, but was the Prophet ﷺ, publicly walking around with his head down, depressed in adversities in Mecca, but was he walking with a smile? And what was the strength that the Prophet was giving even in times of stress? Can you please shed some light on that?
Jazakumullah khair, Sheikh. So please forgive me. I did tell Sheikh I'm tired, but I said Sheikh Yasir is our guest, and we really want to learn from him, huh? But we want to learn from you, Allah. But a few points, Allah barak fikum. Unfortunately, a lot of the times you find many of our brothers and sisters that respond to these calamities with their emotions. And we cannot allow our emotions to dictate how we go about matters. It does feel good, sound good in the short term, but does it bring about khair? Does it revive the spirits within us? Does it change our youth? Does it improve our families? We have to be very careful. I mentioned in Jumu'ah today, we have to be very careful to not be framed. Framed here is not to be accused, but framed is where you and I allow institutions, media to dictate how we think. When are we emotional? When do we make dua for Palestine? When do we stop? We allow people to tell us how to think. And unfortunately, we just fall into those traps unknowingly. What happens if the war on Gaza ends tomorrow? How many people will go back to their old bad habits? What happens to the dua? What happens to the care? What happens to the activism? So if we move on and act based on emotions, we will eventually fail as an ummah. We have to stay optimistic. The Prophet's life, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was filled with difficulties, but he was always seen smiling. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was still with his family, would enjoy his time with his family. We have to be very careful to not mix things up. Don't allow your response to lead you and I to depression, sadness, where I see many families breaking due to what's happened. And some people now, if there's some celebrations happening somewhere, they're against it. Even if it's an ashid, or if it's going out. We have to be very careful because it's not, in the long term, it's not effective. What do I advise myself and everyone here? we have to go back to the basics. We have to go back to the basics. If this conflict has led me to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there's some khair. Like what happens to our next generations if they're still disconnected? To be honest, I am more concerned for Muslims in America to lose their Islam than what's happening in Gaza. This should keep us awake at night. You have people in their 40s that don't know how to read Quran. It's heartbreaking. People in their 20s. But Gaza, they're out there protesting. It's good to protest. But for me, Islam is more important than anyone and anything. And if they're losing their souls, they're heading straight to Jannah. The moment a shaheed falls, the moment they wake up, their first request, Allah allow us to return to dunya to die as a shaheed again. That's what they want. What happens when someone dies and loses their Islam? They ask Allah to return, but not رَبِّ رْجِعُونَ لَعَلِّي أَعْمَلُ صَالِحًا فِي مَا تَرَكْتُ. It's a different ask. Those guys want to return, and those people want to return to die again. Another group wants to return to do some khair because they missed out on the opportunity. So if anything from this conflict, allow us to connect to our Islam. Let's learn the Quran. Let's attend structured talks. Alhamdulillah, we're blessed to have Miftaah in Michigan. Something structured. Not just attending Surah Yusuf. Like we have to go beyond that, especially in Michigan. We are beyond just listening to one surah and a beautiful surah that talks about a love story. It's very important. But we have to go beyond that. We have to go into tafsir of Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah Ali Imran, Surah An-Nisa, and other chapters in the Quran that truly revive our spirits and bring us closer to Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Barakallah.
Takbir. Sheikh Masmudi did not sound tired. Did he sound tired, guys? No, so may Allah give him more strength and barakah. I have a question for you. You have a question? Final question from me to you? Okay, so he's saying this is my final question to him, and they will take 10 questions from the audience. You guys want to ask questions to Yasir Qadhi? Who wants to ask questions? Raise your hand.
I apologize.
Yasir Qadhi gets so excited when you ask him questions, like, wow, someone asking me questions. I'm just joking. Sheikh, I want to ask you a question before we go, and Sheikh Masmudi concluded on this. How important is it watching what's happening in the world, but always crucial for the upbringing of the next generation in Islam? What can we do as parents to make sure that our children, and as Sheikh Masmudi concluded, literally that was going to be my last question to you, how important it is to keep our children in an Islamic environment, connected to the masjid. That's sort of like, so if you want to make your child love Aqsa, I used to say this, before they used to say, oh, talk about Aqsa. I was like, if you want your child to love Aqsa, teach them the tafsir of Surah Isra and the Mi'raj story. If you teach them the seerah, a portion of the seerah, tafsir of Surah Isra, who can't love the people of Palestine? It's coupled with the knowledge of Islam. Of course, there are people who struggle to practice and they still love Aqsa. So Sheikh, if you can shed some light on how crucial and vital it is to make sure this generation tomorrow goes to Aqsa and prays in Aqsa. That our children desire to pray tahajjud in Aqsa, to make dua in Aqsa. Where would that desire come from? So you can shed some light on that, please.
So, Jazakallah khair. Taban, Sheikh Masmudi brings a very, very valid point, and that is that we are seeing a contradiction, an oxymoron, where people are enthused about something that is important, but at the expense of something that is more important. And when we look at the spectrum of religiosity with activism, one of the sad realities is that too many people are on extreme sides of this spectrum. And this is a problem. Too many of our religious folks are disconnected from engagement in activism. And they frown upon it because they think it is a polluted world. Again, like I said, they're living in a sterile environment. That's not the way of the Prophet ﷺ. On the flip side, too many activists are completely disconnected from the dini side, right? And this is extremely pronounced when it comes to political engagement and activism. You have the leaders of activists having no religiosity, maybe even One of them even said Aqsa is not a religious issue, it is a nationalistic issue. One of them from our own community said this, right? Yani, a'udhu billah, how can you possibly say this when Allah praises in the Quran, when the Prophet ﷺ faced Qibla there, how can you possibly say Aqsa is not, when the Prophet ﷺ said that that's where Iman is going to come down, that's where everything's going to happen, when the majority of prophets were from that land, how can you say Aqsa is not a religious issue? But I was shocked to find, well, I shouldn't be, but from our own community, meaning the Muslim community, somebody said this, that your clerics are making this a religious issue. It's not a religious issue. This is for the people of Palestine and whatnot. So you have that side. And on the flip side, you also have, like I said, all too common in the religious camp, those that believe that activism pollutes religiosity. And there are interpretations of Islam that are extremely apolitical, frankly, servile, acquiescing to tyrants. We all know this, right? So we have this spectrum. Obviously, I situate myself on the religious side that is slightly activist. Okay, that's where I put myself. That for me, this is the seerah. For me, this is what the Prophet ﷺ is that it's not just pure ibadah. Religion involves moving and shaking. It involves influencing. It involves dialogue. It involves talking to the people in charge. It involves, if need be, getting involved in actual combat. All of this is part of the religion. I don't understand a religion that is de-toothed, defanged, completely apolitical, completely non-activist. What seerah book are you reading? I don't understand at all. Whose life are you looking up to? What type of seerah is there in which you're not trying to influence and move and shake and bring about a change in society? That's the reality of the seerah. But yes, it must be engaged and couched from within the religious terminology. Now, again, not to get too technical, but there's going to be those that are more activist and less religious, and that's always been the case from the time of post-Sahaba, not in the time of the Sahaba, post-Sahaba. As long as they have love of religion, and they're doing something good to the religion. You know, I have a much longer academic talk is online about political pragmatism. Listen to that. It's a library chat and engagement, political pragmatism. So I go into more detail here. Nonetheless, I stand by what I say, and that is, if you read the seerah, you clearly find religiosity that is actively engaged with changing society. The core is religiosity. There's no doubt about that. And if you have to do an either or, no doubt your religiosity has precedence. And therefore, in lands where you're not allowed to be active, you preserve your religiosity. In lands where you're not allowed to be religious, you cannot live anymore. You see the difference? So there are places in the world where you can't be active. SubhanAllah, not just places. You can't even make dua for Gaza in the holiest places. You can't. You will be expelled. You will be kicked out from certain places. You will be kicked out from the holiest of holy. If
you're so hesitant to say the name. It's amazing. The first time I saw you hold back. No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Some people's lives are as the problem is, you know what I'm saying? Not just mine, others. And it's like, I have many teachers sitting in jail. I have many teachers sitting in jail now. You know, so I have to be, it's not just about me.
Allahumma faraj anhum ya Rabbil Alameen.
I mean, I have to be like sensitive to multiple things out here. But you understand what I'm saying here, and that is that if you're in that environment, are you required to go to jail and make Gaza, dua for Gaza? I mean, you're not. You're really not. And I don't blame any of them that, you know, do that, right? But brutally honest, and this is something I said very clearly, subhanAllah. Let me conclude on this point, inshallah, okay? Let me conclude this point.
You got to answer my question too.
I am answering this.
About the parents and the children, like just the love and, you know, of knowledge and deen.
Mufti Sahib wants his statement to go. I am finishing. I'm getting there, don't worry. My understanding of the seerah is that without a doubt, the priority, look at Meccan phase. When the Prophet couldn't go public, he made private da'wah. He did, didn't he? He still made private da'wah. What he never stopped doing is the personal worship and ta'alluq with Allah. There's no compromise on that. But certain times, you must compromise on activism. And activism is contextual based. So without a doubt, if it's an either or, then you prioritize religiosity and iman and taqwa and salah and zakah and siyam. There's no question that is the priority. But where the situation allows, then the next stage, and that's why I said on stage right here, I said, after you built your masajid, after you've done your Sunday school, after you financed, mashallah, Miftaah and TISA, right? After you financed all of the institutes of higher learning, the next stage is to be active in public and society. And I'm going to conclude on this political point here, okay? Our own Secretary of State, Mr. Blinken, this is not going to get you canceled, don't worry. Mentioning Mr. Blinken and what he's done is not going to take away your tax status.
He doesn't care.
He doesn't care? I'm just kidding, okay. Our own Secretary of State, Mr. Blinken, as soon as the bombs began dropping, he did a tour of the Middle East. And he went country to country, our countries. And he begged the leaders of our countries with one thing. It wasn't to increase aid to Gaza. It wasn't to open a humanitarian corridor. It wasn't to help. You know what his one ask was? He said, make sure your peoples do not protest in public.
Wow.
That was one request. And that's why immediately, doesn't matter how much money you have from oil, the decrees came down, سَمِعْنَا وَأَطَعْنَا. Each one is jumping higher than the other to their master and Lord. So across that region and more, no khutbahs of Gaza, no fundraising for Palestine, no du'as allowed, even in the holiest of holy, not allowed, unless by approval one imam squeezed in with great difficulty generically. Otherwise, nothing allowed. Anybody protests, deported or jailed, whatnot. This is in those lands, right? Now here's the irony. I'm going to conclude at this point. Mr. Blinken has the authority and the gall and the temerity to ask our rulers, and they do not even have the spine to say no, and they say sami'na wa ata'na, and so the whole region is silenced. But what Mr. Blinken has no authority over is right here, me and you. The irony of ironies. He has no authority to silence our voice. The constitution of this country guarantees the freedom of speech to the citizens of this land. No law can be passed that restricts freedom of speech. No country on earth has stronger laws for freedom than we do. Not even Europe. Europe has banned pro-Palestinian. Multiple European countries have banned pro-Palestinian protests. Multiple. France has banned it. Germany has banned it. Netherlands has contemplated banning it. To wave a free Gaza flag is going to get you fined in France. What happened to liberty, equality? What happened to all of that? Thrown out the window. When the Prophet ﷺ was insulted, they told us freedom of speech, laïcité, shut up and sit down. When women are protest for Gaza, they're telling us to shut up or go to jail. All of this, their laws allow them to do that. Guess whose country's laws prohibit restricting free speech?
Our United States of America.
We have the freedom to protest. So then, bluntly, I'm sorry, but how dare we not have then? What a shame when our Muslim brothers and sisters are forced and they have to do it. What a shame when I'm not forced and I'm scared to be silent. What a shame. I must protest loudly. And so, in this country, activism is fard kifaya in this country. And with that, inshallah, Jazakumullah khair, brothers and sisters. We've had a long day today. I've had a long flight as well.
Sheikh Yasir Qadhi, I don't care if you had a long day.
You know,
I'm
trying to get
no
out.
consideration if you had a long flight.
I have another.
We're all in the same game. We're tired, you're tired. 2,000, I think this is 8,000 people here. 8,000.
8,000. You got a lot of jinns in attendance too.
No, Sheikh, you're not counting correctly. 2,000 humans, 6,000 malaika. Give a round of applause for the angels, guys. Takbir. Well, malaik, I'm just giving you a random number for the malaika, but gathering full of angels and beautiful people who are here, brothers and sisters. I'll ask Sheikh Abdul Rahman or Sheikh Masmari to conclude this beautiful gathering with a dua. Beautiful gathering. And brothers and sisters, before you guys leave, Sheikh Yasir Qadhi, Sheikh Masmari, inshallah, Sheikh Mufti Abdul Rahman, Yaqeen Institute, Maghrib Institute, Qalam Institute, Miftaah, IOK. We will be in Dallas. We will be in Dallas for the knowledge retreat. 5 days, a retreat just immersing in the Quran for families. Typically, we have 1,000 people that reserve hotels, come with their families. First year we were in Dallas. Last year we were in Michigan. We're going back to Dallas, so we switched back and forth with Dallas and Detroit. So hopefully you brothers and sisters can go online and find more information. Before you guys go anywhere, we have this program coming up, Faithful Foundations, February 10th, which is next week. Here, inshallah, there'll be dinner will be provided. It is for college students, mainly for college young professionals, from 4 o'clock to 8 p.m. So you brothers and sisters can take this card. There's a QR code. We have Sheikh Ubaidullah Evans there, Imam Khalid Latif, Sheikh Mikhail Smith, Sheikh Suleiman Hani, and the great handsome young Mufti Abdul Rahman. So we will all be here, except some of us. I will be at my beautiful camp in Flint, but most of the scholars will be visiting. It's going to be a great event next week. Brothers and sisters, who are here who is attending a Miftaah program for the first time? Raise your hand. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Hold on, it took you this long? But you know what? Umar ibn Khattab came 6 years later, beat everybody. It's okay. So if you came for the first time, give yourself a round of applause, guys. MashaAllah. So I recommend, MashaAllah, everyone's been so busy. I recommend you guys look at the online programs we have for your children. Quran, private tutoring for your children. Arabic programs for adults and young people. Learn the understanding, meaning of the Quran. The associates programs, beautiful programs all on the website. If you have social media, astaghfirullah, say astaghfirullah. But alhamdulillah, subscribe to Sheikh Yasir Qadhi's page. Subscribe to the beautiful scholars online and subscribe to the work that the institutions are doing. Yaqeen Institute, Miftaah Institute, Qalam Institute, all these institutions, so your algorithms can guide you to the right directions. And the messages that are being shared, you're up to date of what's going on. I know you guys are saying, well, you're just promoting an institute. No, it's an opportunity to follow the right messages as the new content is being shared daily of what's happening. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward all you guys for coming from so far. I'll hand the mic to Sheikh Masmari to conclude the dua. Just short.
No, I'm not Mike. Wallah, I'm not.
I thought he was ready. His hands are ready. And Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Ya arhamar rahimin, ya arhamar rahimin, ya arhamar rahimin. اللهم اجعل جمعنا هذا جمعا مرحوما وتفرقنا من بعده معصوما ونسألك يا مولانا لا تجعل فينا ولا منا ولا معنا شقي ولا محروما ارحمنا يا مولانا اللهم اجعل آخر كلامنا من الدنيا لا إله إلا الله اللهم ثبتنا قبل الممات اللهم ثبتنا قبل الممات. We ask Allah to accept us, to forgive us for our shortcomings. Ya Allah, forgive us for our shortcomings. Ya Allah, forgive us for our shortcomings. Ya Allah, preserve our iman, preserve our Islam. Preserve our iman, preserve our Islam, preserve our families, preserve our communities. Ya Allah, as we get together and we raise our hands, Ya Allah, bring victory to our brothers and sisters around the world, those whom are being oppressed and wronged, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, be with them. Ya Allah, be with them. Ya Allah, be with them. اللهم بارك لنا في رجب وشعبان وبلغنا رمضان. اللهم بارك لنا في رجب وشعبان وبلغنا رمضان. We ask Allah to bless the month of Rajab and Sha'ban and to make us among those whom revive the month of Ramadan, establish the month of Ramadan, pray in the month of Ramadan, fast in the month of Ramadan, and receive Allah's acceptance in the month of Ramadan. Ameen, Allahumma ameen, wa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.